Okay, so whenever you're ready, go ahead and call the meeting to order.
I'm going to call the meeting to order.
And go ahead and ask for a motion and a second to approve the January 26 minutes.
I want to make,
Yeah, ask for a motion and a second.
can I get a motion for a second? Is that right?
Yeah, for the
For the,
minutes of the 26th.
for the minutes of the January 22nd, 2021. All right. We got Salzer and Salzer.
Yep. Salzer was the first, Elsasser was the second. And then just ask if there's any changes or corrections.
Any changes or corrections?
Hearing none, go ahead and
Seeing
ask.
none?
All those in favor say aye.
All those in favor say aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
All those opposed? Same.
Okay. Mr. Rosenbaum, how do you vote on the minutes?
Aye.
Ms. Blair, how do you vote on the minutes?
Aye.
And Mr. Renaud?
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. So next up are the informational items, and so
Next up, we have the informational items, reports, other minutes, and updates.
Mr. Tuttle is here for the ETSB, so he can come to that microphone and give his report.
Mr. Tuttle, can you come up?
Okay. Just wanted to give a quick update. The Emergency Telephone System Board is nearing the completion of upgrading our 911 centers in Peoria and Bartonville. So hopefully by the end of March, those will be totally completed, and we'll be hosting an open house for all of you to come see the improvements that we've been able to make, and they're very nice and be a good work environment for our 911 dispatchers.
Ask if anybody has any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, next we have the Public Defender report.
Nate Bach will come up and do his thing.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't have any additions or corrections to my report. I did want to expound a little bit on the transition from part-time to full-time. As this committee knows, we've been approved to hire 2 full-time attorneys for the coming year, so we have those applications posted. We received some applications and resumes. I wish it was more of a flood, but it's been more of a steady trickle. So I'm setting up interviews, trying to get people lined up to fill those positions. So I hope to, next month, at least have one of those filled, and provide an update and some information for the first meeting.
Is for any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing none, we can move on. Thank you.
And Sheriff's going to do the next one.
Next, we have Sheriff Asbell's presentation.
Thank you. I was asked last week to, in relation to the House Bill 3653, to put together a presentation. There wouldn't be enough time in this committee for me to go over things. That's why on Friday I had the county administrator send out the slide presentation so everyone is aware of some of the issues that we saw in this House bill. Obviously, yesterday this was signed into law by Governor Pritzker, and now it's really an opportunity, or how are we going to manage this moving forward. I want to begin by first acknowledging that I personally, and I think this board knows me well enough, that I have been and continue to be an advocate for reform. I think it's necessary, long overdue on many parts, and I truly believe 70% plus of this reform bill was necessary and good. It's also things that we've already done. For example, the body cameras. There's other things with transparency that we have already put into play. because we knew that was the right way to do business in this industry. It's about public trust. But in acknowledging that, the other 30%, that's really where I had the issue, and it's mostly because of either the language is conflicting or ambiguous, where we really don't have clear direction how to manage things we once did. I'm also going to acknowledge that you're starting to see a division, a greater divide between, I won't even say, I don't know if it's political, but it's just ideologies where people will say this reform bill is the end of the world, and the others say it's long overdue. I first want to apologize, and I have been sometimes part of that narrative where I'm saying this is completely dangerous. When I've said that before, I think that was taken out of context when I'm talking about a specific piece of this bill. I believe in balance. I believe in us working together collectively, because there's still going to be an opportunity for a trailer bill to clean up some of the major concerns. The biggest problem, though, is what damage has been done, as in the mentality of the people in this profession, and how do we move forward and manage that. We at the Sheriff's Office, we have lost 10 employees since January. And I expect more, because there's this feeling, this perspective that, and this is just a piece of it. This is just a piece of it. It's been a very long 11 months for those that work either in corrections or on the street or other employees here at court security. There's been so much going on from one issue to another, and fatigue is at a different level. And this just got added on top of it. And it's really where we had to try to find this balance and to reassure our employees that, no, we're there for them, we're going to figure this out, and let's move forward. But we're competing now with other states. I'll give packages out after this that, there's clearly recruitment efforts from other states trying to take advantage of this legislation, recruiting officers to move there, because that narrative that's hurt the profession, it's not just Illinois, it's been the whole nation. So there's a need for resources throughout the nation, and they're using this to their advantage. I'm going to highlight a couple of the pieces that I think that what we really need to concentrate on, that I think that's really putting the most displeasure, I don't know if that's the right word, but angst from those in the profession, that's really causing this mentality, like either I'm going to get out of the profession or I'm going to go to a different area where I can do this job. And that's really going to go with, there's a couple of slides, and it's the use of force language. I think there were several slides in the package that I sent out relative to that. And it's really specific to how we can now manage an arrest, and the interpretation that law enforcement is having, because it's in the language, states that, and I'm going to simplify this, if someone is resisting and you know their identity and they're not a clear and obvious threat to another person, and you have an opportunity, a reasonable expectation or opportunity to arrest them at a later time, you have a duty to retreat. So you can put that in context in so many different situations, and I'll just use a very simple one. So if you were going to handcuff someone and they pulled away from you, that's by definition an active resistor. And at that point, if you know their name under this legislation, the mindset is, now I have to let them go. And you could see where that could be a problem for police officers, because you could create a situation where you might never be able to arrest someone. And it doesn't take long for both sides to figure out how this game is played. Case in point, when we started a zero pursuit policy, nonetheless, it's a fleeing felon. You better have some very dire circumstances to chase after someone. That word got out pretty quick. And so often that when we do a car stop and someone doesn't want to get caught, they know our policies, so what do? They take off. And that's what I'm fearful, if we don't get a clear understanding and educate our community on some of the pieces of this law now, that we're going to have a big problem. And this feeds into the mindset of the law enforcement officer. Well, I can't do this, and then there's other, what they'll say is punitive language in this bill that makes them feel like, if I do this, I'm going to be arrested. Case in point, body cameras, BWCs. Huge advocate of this. We here as a county, we jumped in front of this back in 2018. We worked with Peoria City, East Peoria, and some other agencies to get these body-worn cameras. Huge expense. We limited our exposure and expense because we have a local server. That's no longer an option. So storage space is going to be at a premium. It's going to cost a lot of money for storage and ongoing maintenance to collect these videos. The body cameras now is a tool. It's a wonderful tool. The police officers love this tool. It changes the demeanor at so many different calls when you know you're being recorded. It keeps people honest. The problem is we've always used this for review to write our reports. And in this language, they've changed that where the officer no longer has the authority to review the video to document their police report. But then later on in the bill, it says the officer could be subject to a Class 3 felony if they omit, or don't relay all the facts of an incident. And if you look at that through the perspective of a police officer, what does that mean? It feels like it's punitive. I had a wonderful tool that I could use to give the product what they need to have this report, and I can't use it. Now, they'll argue, well, the supervisor can review it or an FTO can review it, but again, that's just the way, and I'm speaking to you as a cop, and this is how we look at this language and how this influences where the mindset is right now. The other piece with the body camera too, and it's written there that you can be charged with a Class 3 felony if you fail to turn it on for any police encounter. And in the packet, I use a perfect example. You know, you have someone that runs into the mailbox, you wave them over, you get out of the car to assist them in their problem, and they forget to turn the camera on, they forget to flip it up. You potentially could be subjected to a Class 3 felony. Out of context, I guarantee I am. Would that ever happen? I'm very doubtful. But again, from the perspective of a police officer, that threat exists. That's a threat to the profession, or to you at an individual level. The other ones, law enforcement shall issue a citation in lieu of arrest for category or Class B and C misdemeanors or traffic. And we'll, okay, again, specific, I'll put it in context, and we're going to go right to this example of a trespass complaint. It's a Class B misdemeanor, and it's a very common call for service that we have. Person removal is one of the more frequent calls we have. Got a problem at the bar, got a problem at the business, got someone on my property. And we've always had these options, but now this specifically says for Class B and C misdemeanors, you should write a citation. The argument is you can't remove someone from the situation, and it's going to continue. We had a litmus test last summer because of COVID and the restrictions we put on the jail, and I can show you video of some of the nights that we dealt with because you're very limited in what you can do, and that scares me. It's a business is one thing. Someone's personal, your front porch is a different story. And where my fear is with all this, and I'll kind of get this to the end, is I'm fearful we're going to create a situation of vigilantism, meaning individuals that feel they can't get the service from the police. They've been out there several times. I've got someone on my property. I have my own rights, my property. I'm going to take care of this myself. And then we all end up in front of the judge and the state's attorney trying to sort this out. And I don't want it to go that route. And that's why I'm really trying to take this balanced approach. I've already talked about the body-worn camera, the use of force, and I'll go right into the no cash bail. I have been a opponent to this well before this has passed, and let's give you my reasons why I am. And keep in mind, there's a 2-year window on this. The timeline for the no cash bail doesn't go until 2023. So there's time to work some of these issues out. But the no cash bail component is, it's dangerous. And I'm not going to use that word anymore. It's concerning. It's concerning because we, legislators, we have made the jail a de facto mental health center. It's our only option. And my argument is, if we were going to tear this courthouse down to build a new one, we wouldn't drop this one and spend 3 years to build a new courthouse to be up and operational again. You would build the courthouse, hopefully out by 301 Maxwell Road so we don't have all these transports, but you would build it at a different location. You would get it up and operational before you tear this one down. And that's my argument here. We do not have the infrastructure because of poor legislative decisions back in the 80s. I'll go back to the 1994 crime bill. But in the late 80s and the 90s, we had Zeller. We had these other facilities in the state where the jail didn't have to be the mental health center, but it has become that. I don't like it. It's a lot of work. It costs us a lot of money. It puts us in a lot of very litigious situations, but it's our only option. And I'll talk behavior health because that brings in addictions as well. We haven't talked much about the heroin epidemic, the overdoses, the meth that's moving into our region as well. Highly addictive, deadly substances, fentanyl laced, overdoses. A lot of our addicts are going to do property crimes. It goes hand in hand, or other type of crimes. They have to support their habit. And if you don't have, I'm going to use a very general term, a timeout, you're going to lose these. You're going to lose these individuals. As a detective, I did a lot of deceptive practices. It seems like a lot of the addicts, they started with writing bad checks, stealing a check in the middle of the book from mom and dad and going and cashing it. And I had to sit there and convince the parents to press charges on them because your child will die. They will die if they stay on the street. This is why I'm scared if we go to a no cash system or bail system, these individuals won't have a timeout. They said, well, no, we're going to send them to treatment. Okay, where? They're going to go for mental health treatment. Okay, where? Where is this? Please tell me, are we going to build this in the next 2 years? The other factor to this is if you truly believe there's going to be a pretrial risk assessment, and if the argument is the input to this assessment, it's going to be built from police data. That's all you have. You're going to use, criminal history, failure to appears, the crime. All this is going to go into an algorithm. And if there's an argument that the police data is discriminatory, I would believe the outcome of this risk assessment would be discriminatory as well. You put bad input, you're going to have bad output, which potentially could keep more people in custody. The argument with, a domestic battery charge, the most frequent charge we see here locally for an on-view arrest. Warrants are by far the most, but for on-view arrest, if you look at the bookings in the jail on an annual basis, this is the number one. And it's because law enforcement for the last 2 decades has really had a must-arrest situation. If there's a claim and there's evidence of any physical abuse, that we have to take action because of the danger of this individual remaining in the household or at large. So under that theory, anyone that's arrested for domestic still poses a threat to another individual, they would automatically qualify, I would think, for not being released and being on no bond status. that could actually increase the jail population to a level we've never seen before. That's my concern with that one. And lastly, it's that victim's perspective. Everything changes once you put it in perspective of a victim. If someone steals my car, yeah, I kind of want my pound of flesh. So it's trying to find the balance of all this and how we're going to manage this. And you can see, going back to what I earlier said about the fatigue on staff and how this plays into it. Is this the sole reason why we've lost 10 people since January? No, it's not. 80% of them it is. Most of them from the jail. Why are we losing them from the jail? Because there's a huge migration from police officers, and the jail has always been an applicant pool for this profession. They have exposure to working in law enforcement, so they're getting hired left and right to go to police departments. And this is where us collectively, we're going to have to make some decisions is how we're going to manage this moving forward, how are we going to mitigate the financial risks, how are we going to mitigate the legal exposures, the civil liabilities. If we don't have enough staff to be compliant with jail standards and we have something bad happen, sorry, Jenny's going to have a lot more work to do. We all will, and it's potentially, it's something that could be avoided. If it's predictable, it's preventable. That's preventable. You're going to have a decision to make on service contracts. The U.S. Marshals, I'll bring that up for the jail. Our ADP this morning, the jail was 262. 5 years ago, I'd been clicking my heels if that was our population. It's low, but under COVID, you got them all spread out. You still need as much staff, if not more, than you would with 500 detainees, because for each housing unit. So if you don't have the staff to be compliant with jail standards, what's your first thing to do? Well, get more staff, but I'll get to that. Or you reduce your exposure, and 50 of those detainees are marshals. 40 of them are IDOC holds that we're still having this battle with the Department of Corrections for transfers. We can limit that so you'd be into a workable margin, but at what cost? And what I'm going to do the next couple months, and I'll bring this back to this committee, is kind of do that study. Is you always $65 a day is the per diem we use for detainees. Is that the true savings or cost? No, it's not, because you really have to look at what point do you need personnel. That's where the true costs are. Commodities, food. There is a cost there, but it's not really going to hurt any budget. It's the personnel, and you got to find where that line is, where you can reduce your FTE count or increase your FTE count to reduce liability. Same thing with police side, police contracts. If we don't have enough staff on the street, you're going to limit your specialty positions, and you'll probably have to get rid of some of these contracts. And we'll have to have that talk anyway. It's hard to, in the financial crisis we were in, we're not out of it from last year. It's hard to say we're going to subsidize a contract, meaning if they're paying 70 cents on the dollar for dedicated police services, you have to look at it from someone that lives. Why would someone from Kickapoo want to have their tax dollars subsidized to pay for Princeville's policing? And it's trying to find that balance. And I'll argue we'll take the calls anyway. It gives us some money. Logistically, it makes sense to have them there. But we're at that point now. You put this all together, how to manage this. And this is where I don't think it's just my decision or the sheriff's decision how this is managed. It's collective with the board as partners, how we're going to figure this out. What is the best strategy? I said yesterday I don't like strategic planning because all of our plans really have gone to the wayside very quick. It's a very fluid situation that we live in. It's more management, strategic management. my other fear is what I just said. I could go through each slide and say where the concern from the perspective of law enforcement is. But here's what is going to happen, and I'm confident because I've already seen it, and it's not just our agency, it's across the state. How's the individual officer going to manage this risk? How are they going to manage this risk if I potentially could be found, be criminally charged for a simple mistake? Again, I doubt that would ever happen, but it's in their head. If I don't do anything, I don't do anything wrong. That's what I'm fearful is going to happen. Meaning, we're going to pay a lot of money to have police officers become clerical workers. We're not going to be proactive. I'll show up, I'll do my report. Can't have a use of force situation if I don't have a use of force situation. Meaning if they run, I'll write my report. And this is another issue that's going to feed my position, the chiefs of police, the state's attorney. You're in a no-win situation, times a million. I'm accountable to the citizens of this county. They expect, a level of service, but then you have to balance this with how you manage your staff. Well, then you can say, well, why don't you discipline them if they're not doing their job? Ladies and gentlemen, we do not have applicants. We don't. It's not zero applicants, but we are not having the applicants we once did. You do a test before, and you'd have, the city would have 500 people show up. We would have 200 people show up. And that's been a trend for years. It's just been really highlighted after this last year. So you could really, if you don't find a way to manage this, you could end up with less people. And it creates a bigger problem. And you have more mandated overtime, and you have more people leave. So, how's Brian's life been the last couple months? It's been a challenge. And I'm just trying to be as honest as I can. We've had issues with I'll use, and if Chairman Rand was here, he'd be a perfect example, how this affects the EMS system. If you read this law now, the legislative intent is we no longer want police going on medical or mental health calls. That's the legislative intent. We've already had situations where in EMS where a doctor gives an order that I need this individual brought in. And traditionally, law enforcement will show up with fire and an ambulance crew, and we'll take that lead role. And sometimes, yes, it's a use of force to get them on the gurney. The fire and the paramedics, they've got a doctor's order that says, no, I'm ordering you to bring this person in. Now, us, police, we're in a situation where I'm looking at this law, I can't do that anymore. And we'll just wait it out. But in these medical situations, it's a crisis. We have one that had someone with low potassium. They could go into cardiac arrest if they weren't brought in. So we've already had these situations, and it's just trying to figure this all out collectively. And it was really just kind of holding your breath until the law was passed, because I didn't want to be premature. And I'm still confident, optimistic that we're going to have a trailer bill to clean some of this up. So I don't want to, keep on saying, the sky's fallen, but there's obvious concerns, but it's already damaged the employee group. Even if we come out and say, no, this is what this means, we got clarification, I think it's, again, highlighted by the year of fatigue with everything else going on. So, in saying that, I could sit here and ramble forever, and I'm sorry, and I hope that the slide presentation kind of gave a fairly decent representation of some of our concerns. I will acknowledge just this morning I had a long meeting with Representative Gordon Booth. I feel a lot better on some of this language when I say that we're going to have a trailer bill. I do. And I also acknowledge, and that's why I pulled myself back from saying dangerous again, because I think both sides right now have this rhetoric where one is screaming fear-mongering, they're fear-mongering, they're lying, and the other side says, this is dangerous, people are gonna die, we both have to stop that. And I totally agree with that. So I'm pulling myself back, and I acknowledge, yeah, I was there. I was saying, this is dangerous, this is what's gonna happen. It's just how I do risk assessments, and it's buzzwords I use, but words matter. We all know that words matter, what we've seen over the last year in so many different fronts, which is going to add to that problem. So I do want to say to this committee that I'm highly optimistic that we're going to work a lot of this language stuff out. We're going to get a clearer understanding how to do this. But what I can't say to this committee is, has the damage already been done to a certain population of the employee? Will that continue? Will that just be continue because if we lose some, you're putting more work hours on those that are there. They're just going to get more burned out because of mandated overtime. It's that big snowball that it's really hard to stop right now. So I will just kind of open it to any specific questions or any questions you might have.
Wanted to say thank you for your presentation, and thank you for informing us and giving us all this information about this big, long, huge bill that is going to take a while to read, and you kind of broke it down for us to give us some insight. So it was helpful.
Thank you, and we'll continue that. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack, and people don't like change, and we're the same way. But I still, you know, we have a duty for individual rights, people's rights. It's trying to figure out what the intent of the language was and how to manage this. And again, I truly believe some of the concerns that we have, if we get a trailer bill that cleans that language, that gives more direction, well, those problems will go away.
Well, thank you, Brian, for your honesty and candor. And I'm glad, first of all, I'm glad to hear that there's 70% of it that's good. And, you know, I brought it up at the county board meeting most recently, and it was just troubling because I knew something was wrong because, you know, the legislature passed it in the dark of night in 6 hours, which I've always been an advocate over the years that every budget and every piece of legislation in Springfield people should have access to it for at least like 1 week so they can at least read it and know what's in it before they vote on it. But you know, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, you know, when the Peoria Journal-Star publishes today on the front column of the paper that Illinois is the second most corrupt state in the United States. You know, that's certainly nothing to brag about, and so I guess I shouldn't be surprised at that part. But the other 30% is very troubling, and I you know, the fact that Pritzker didn't sign it for a whole month, I figured there was something in there that just wasn't quite right. You know, that possibly he was even troubled about, and so he finally signed it, and you know, I asked at the meeting that you would, you know, bring forth your suggestions, and I'll continue to advocate for the other 30% that you disagree with or, you know, have concerns about is a better way to put it, that the county board would, you know, somehow adopt your concerns in writing and take them and send our recommendation and support to Representative Booth and Senator Kaler and whoever else may, you know, would be involved in it, which would be the whole legislature and the governor, because did I hear you right when you said that with regarding to the cash bail that someone can go out and be arrested for domestic battery, say, for example, a husband is beating a wife, and you will bring him in and you actually cannot hold him that night, or you didn't say that?
No, what I said, it could be just the opposite. It could be where that risk, because if it's written, if this person is perceived a risk to another individual, they could be held on a no bond status, meaning they'd be there. And that's why I said this is the number one charge that the on-view charge that we see at the facility. And again, I mean, totality of circumstances. Some of them should. They should remain in custody if it's an aggravating factor or whatever. But this is something that, I mean, and this is where, the state's attorney will be, and judicial discretion is involved. But if it's written that there's a potential threat to another human, that comes into the conversation. You might have where, the reluctance to let somebody out. It's finding that balance. It's what is the balance? What is the legislative intent? So, and that's, again, I think we're all, I knew this was going to get passed once it passed the General Assembly. It's just now, it's the reality of it, and just trying to deal with the emotional roller coaster with staff. And we're not alone, Peoria City, all the agencies. I mean, the smaller agencies, we're going to get into a bidding war over employees. If it's scarcity of resources. Scarcity of resources. If you only have X amount of individuals that want to go in this, and you have X amount of, or Y number of jobs, it's going to be a very competitive market. It's going to influence how we do collective bargain negotiations. All this is going to come in, how we manage this. But the number one thing that I see right now, my role is for staff is reassurance. And I think it needs to come from me, it needs to come from the state's attorney, it needs to come from this board, it needs to come from our community that, no, we'll get through this, we'll figure this out. We need that reassurance and being positive as we go through this process. And that's what I'm committed to right now.
So on the risk assessment, do they do that the following day then? Like if it happens at midnight, or does that happen that night?
The devil's in the details. I don't know. That's, again, there's a 2-year window to figure a lot of these components out. Okay. But I mean, currently, if someone's there on a felony charge, they've got 48 hours to make that initial appearance decision, whether to release, whether to charge, whether to not charge. And I mean, that's going to be the bigger question. We need to have court administration, probation at the table. The next question is, okay, if we're going to do these pretrial releases, who's managing that? Currently, it falls under probation. So if there's a violation of pretrial release, who's going to manage that? Potentially, I would need 10 more process servers just to manage the amount of court communication and try to get people back in front of the judge, because I think there is a 48-hour clause on some of those. The same thing. There'll be an increase of warrants. We'll have more warrants. By statute, the sheriff is responsible for the service of all warrants. There's going to be more work there. Now, the other argument is if you have less cops, you're going to have less arrests, less people in jail. And that's why, I did that SWOT analysis. One of the solutions might be, I mean, we have a whole, classification of jail technicians. If you're only booking 6 people a day and you got a workforce of 12, does it make sense to have that classification? Could we evolve that back into correctional officers where we need more thing? There's always solutions. It's just finding the right path, and it's just trying to do it right where you're not hurting a work group and you don't want to hurt, retention at the same time.
On the trespassing, you said that was a misdemeanor 3, or would you call that, or?
Class B.
Class B, okay. So, for example, if a woman calls in and there's a guy running around out in her yard or whatever.
Or pasture
or whatever. When your officer comes, he can only write him a citation.
That's where we need the clarification. Right now it says if it doesn't pose an immediate threat, there's always going to be an argument. No, it takes it back to that officer's discretion. But I think the mindset is right now, if my discretion is wrong, if I make the wrong decision, yeah, what can happen to me, punitively at an individual basis? And that's why I said this, where's the risk mitigation going to be at the individual level? But yeah, that's the way it's written. And again, this is where we need clarification. And it easily can be clarified to kind of put that discretion piece in there where it says, no, you have the authority for removal, but then that would spider web to a use of force, how that language is written, where, yeah, I know his identity. I still have the ability to, you know, effect an arrest with using the least amount of force necessary.
I mean, that's obviously very troubling, you know, because you would have no idea whether the guy is up to no good at all, you know, when you leave, you know, i.e. trying to go into the house and attack her, or whether he's just out there looking for a lawnmower to steal. I mean, either one's bad, but, you know, but.
And they mentioned there's going to be a huge training influx and component to all of this. Training is, and I'll say this: if there's any law enforcement executive that is complaining about this bill because of the training standards, they shouldn't be law enforcement executives. We need the best training. We need more training. My argument is, though, okay, how are we going to pay for it? With the additional training, the way this is set up, at a minimum, my overtime line budget for all my divisions, police, at least 80 hours. We'll have to go to core service training. And since our staffing level is where it's at, overtime's at a premium. Every time that I put someone in a training class, I've got to either do it on their day off, or I got to backfill the overtime from their shift. So it's coming at 1.5 either way. 8 times 80 hours times every employee. We're talking a lot of dollars there. And that's why I said there's a lot to figure out. What's going to be the financial component? There's a 72-hour clause for warrants for either transport. We'll have to have, we used to have a transport team, a full-time transport team, because there's a stopwatch that starts every time someone's in custody. Civil process. I mean, there's going to be staffing, and by statute, just because what the roles of sheriffs in Illinois are, a lot of these cost transfers will transfer over to our office. And you know how I am with budget. I'm always so nice about budget.
Well,
It's that farmer blood in me,
yeah,
Mr.
that's
Elsasser.
a
You know,
good
we
thing.
complain about everything.
That's a good thing. So about 2 weeks ago, someone very flippantly said, well, all the state police are leaving for Indiana. Well, we know all the state police are not going to leave for Indiana, but you certainly laid out, you know, something that it's a big concern. I mean, how are we going to? Who would want to be a police officer if you could be charged with a felony for getting to throw your camera up when, you know, someone might be dying on the road, and your first concern is, you know, hopping out and giving them CPR or you know, stopping the bleeding, you know, by clamping off the arm or something so they don't die. So, I mean, this should be a big concern to our county board as to how not only how many officers we're going to be able to retain, but we're going to have to pay them a lot more, because if there's just a few that are available.
Well,
You know,
I'll say this. I think
the city and the state and the county and the park district and all the other police entities.
I do want to say this before I forget to just acknowledge to this committee that we're thinking ahead, and I've talked to the county administrator, and we're going to move here shortly and start a lateral bonus. I don't want to call it a sign-on bonus, but we're going to start, you know, an incentive program. It costs us for patrol alone over $25,000 just to get someone through the academy. 25 salary, benefits, you know, paying for the school, all that. Your money ahead, even if you put that at 50% to get someone coming in the door, and you have to have it to a price at the level that draws somebody's attention to. And can that happen to us as well? Meaning, can the bigger departments that have the money or have the need that get a little bit more aggressive in this bidding war do it to us too? We're going to offer 50% more than what the county sheriff offered, and you could see this leapfrog. I guess if you were an officer, there's a market out there now where you can go, and I'll say this across the board, and everyone in their industry, management of millennials, and I don't want to say all of them, but it's different. It's different. They have different morals and values, and it's trying to how to figure what motivates them. But what I have seen, they're not afraid to be what I'll call gypsies. They're not afraid to move from job to job to job. they almost like it. They like, you know, I'll get bored in one area, I'm gonna move to, it's time for me to go to the big city, I'm going to Chicago, or I'm gonna, time for palm trees, I'm gonna go to Florida or California. And that's gonna be something hard to manage regardless, but collectively, I think we just have to, you know, everyone in this room is a recruitment for the county, for employees. When you're out and about, you're always recruiting. I mean, we want the best. We want to limit our liabilities. We want good employees, and that's the goal.
Are there any other,
But just one thing, Madam Vice Chairman, it doesn't have to be today, but over the next month or so, I would really like to see the board, you know, take his 30% of the bill where he has concerns and put it in writing and, you know, discuss it and possibly, hopefully send our support to see some changes in some of these things.
okay, we can have a discussion. I think we have to make sure everyone is in agreement with, yes. Is there any other members that have questions for Sheriff Asbell? Yes. Oh,
This is Paul Rosenbaum. Sheriff, I just want to thank you for being proactive and seeing how everything is. You know, it's nice to hear that there's 70% of the bill that you say we need, and bringing up the potential problems that there could be with the other 30%. I just you coming to us, telling us up front in the beginning, so we're not blindsided later down the road when we have to bring more funds to your operations so you can train the officers. And I just want to thank you for all that you've been doing on that. So no other questions other than we got an email from a constituent that was complaining, saying that you were saying one thing or another, that it wasn't true. Would you be able to address that email or not?
I would need to see the specifics of the email. I mean, please forward me if there's an email out there where someone's got a complaint, and I'll respond. And ask and I shall receive.
Sheriff, it came in just before the meeting started. We'll forward it on to you, and all the committee members are going to get a copy of it as well. So give your a chance to review it, and then if you want to respond, we'll coordinate that for the board and the committee.
Okay, understood.
Salzer?
Phil, can you use your microphone, please?
Sheriff, I appreciate you coming and taking so much time to inform us in regards to much of this bill and so forth. You touched on one thing, and I don't know whether you and Jahan, Representative Gordon, spoke about this, but it has to do with the mental health aspect of this, and unfortunately, hindsight's always easier than foresight. Years ago, when the governor, a particular governor, closed our health clinic out here, Zeller. Can you speak a little bit more in regard to what this bill deals and causes problems for you?
Let me answer it this way. I've said this before. 80% of the individuals in custody have some form of mental illness. Depression, as it's situational, but it is a form of mental illness, and it's something we have to manage all the time. That's my argument against the no cash bail. If we don't have this other courthouse built up and running, if we don't have the infrastructure in place, which we don't, we're having trouble right now even getting qualified mental health workers to work our contract. And that's going to go the same with this component of having more of the social worker in the field. I'll remain optimistic. that we need that. But I don't know if we're going to get a 23-year-old graduate or 22-year-old graduate from Bradley University that's willing to go down to some of these situations without police there. And if we do, maybe we should give them a gun and a badge, and guess what? Now we're back to having a cop again. I think this is a need, not just in Peoria, but across the state. And we're a lot better than other counties. I mean, look at a Stark County, look at a Henry County, look at these smaller populated counties that they're going to have to pay a premium to get these services in for their agencies and their needs. And we're in a moment of history where this pandemic and everything else that's going on with it, the economy, you're going to have more and more instances of mental health needs. And I've always said, criminal justice reform should have been, Mr. Tuttle's not here, it should be dispatch reform. Quit calling us to those calls. Start with that right there and send the right people to these calls. But we get called in from everything, from kids not doing homework, and they escalate, or, to a homicide. And we have to wear all these hats. But no, there's a need, and I think, the legislators passed this bill. I think they need to go hand in hand and start giving the communities and building this infrastructure to have these behavioral health centers that can be utilized. Because that's my question, where do I send them? If we don't want them in the jail, where do they go? So, yeah, it's something that maybe it is being built, but it's not here today, and you're not going to build it in 2 years. That's a big undertaking.
Is there any other, we want to give opportunity to check with everyone around the room first and then come back. Is that okay? Okay. Any other? No? Just Sharon?
I just want to say, I know that what Brian Elsasser is saying about putting together a statement, but I really believe that we should leave that up to our sheriff, and obviously he's been communicating with our state senators and representatives, so I'm very comfortable with the work that he is doing.
Personally, I agree with Sharon. I trust that Sheriff Aspel can handle the communications with Representative John Gordon Booth and Dave Kaler. And I'm open to learning a whole lot more about this and seeing if we can have resolutions going forward to work it out locally.
I'm parched. I've been talking a lot.
Next up is the resolution.
Next
Thank
up
you.
is the resolution. Can I get a motion? Riker?
Second.
Second?
Yep, Phil's got it. And then someone from the courts. Who was it, Renee or Jennifer? Who's going to speak to it?
So what you have before you today is a resolution to a budget amendment to support the purchase of some COVID rapid relief funding that is being received by the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, and Supreme Court approved a funding mechanism to assist jurisdictions across the state of Illinois in purchasing technology to promote the remote proceedings policies that they implemented during the pandemic. The Supreme Court started a remote process policy proceeding, started investigating them and considering them prior to the pandemic, but that brought it to the forefront. I'm sorry, Ken, do what? Isn't it on? Okay, I have to get closer, sorry. Okay, sorry. So prior to the pandemic, the Supreme Court was already considering remote processes in different proceedings, civil proceedings, and the pandemic just brought it to the forefront and accelerated that process. However, most of the jurisdictions across the state are not prepared to, with all the technology necessary to conduct these proceedings. So therefore, in November 20th, they released some funding announcements that jurisdictions could apply for this funding, and they would review and approve based on needs, first come, first served basis. Peoria County reviewed our needs, and so did Tazewell County. We both submitted requests to the Supreme Court to fund the items listed in the agenda briefing here today. And the Supreme Court approved, so I'm very pleased to bring that forward. I want to also say that the Supreme Court supported the remote proceedings early in the pandemic by providing licenses to all the judiciary for those remote proceedings. So they have been paying and supporting this process through Zoom and providing those Zoom licenses to all the judges, and continue to do so today. This is just the technology basis for each courtroom that provides AV carts, which 10 of our courtrooms do not have currently, and we have 2 portable AV carts that they share. So with the increase in remote proceedings, this allows us to purchase 6 additional AV carts that can be transported, and most of these will be permanently installed in each of the courtrooms, so we don't have to move them so much. They're very large, they're 75-inch screens. So we're pleased that we're able to receive that funding. We're also included in this funding opportunity is an upgrade to our traffic courts AV system, which currently does not provide remote proceedings. Several of our criminal courtrooms do have that remote capability to communicate with the jail and other jurisdictions. But this is now providing an upgrade to courtroom 121 so that it can now do the remote proceedings as well on the large screen through their AV system. It provides funding for misdemeanor court, which is our very first courtroom that was outfitted with AV equipment and remote proceedings with the jail. So it's in desperate need of update, so the Supreme Court approved that purchase and to do that complete upgrade. And then it just has an Adobe Sign license agreement so that the judges can forward documents to and from patrons as they do a remote proceeding and sign those documents and return them back to the court electronically. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this.
I think this is good. Just a couple questions from my side. One is maybe elaborate on the bidding process. Did we go out and bid on these quotes, or did the AOIC have approved suppliers that we tied into that already had bids in? And then the second question would be the integration of this technology into the other systems within the county that the courts use, so it works together, kind of a longer-term plan.
Yes, it is integrated with all of the technology currently in the courtrooms. It's integrated with the technology for the electronic recording system, and that is a state system. It's managed and updated by the state of Illinois, and that's for our electronic court record, which is mandatory to have. So it is fully integrated with that. And our PA system here within all of the courtrooms. The bidding process for most all of the technology in the courtroom has been determined in the past to be sole source projects because of the uniqueness to that, and the vendor that has been installing the equipment is familiar with all that. They also have the statewide contract with the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts to service all of the courtroom technology across the state for the electronic recording. So it specifically requires that expertise for this equipment to be updated. So it did not go out through a formal bidding process.
Member Ricker, I think what the key takeaway there was It's running through a vendor of the AOIC. And so where possible, where there's materials or supplies that can be purchased off the state bid, that's being done.
Any other questions?
This is Paul Rosemum. I've got one. None of this stuff will be purchased, though, until we get the grant in our checking account, correct?
The time is of the essence for these purchases because the funding is only available through June 30th of this year. It's you have to spend it or lose it. The Supreme Court has already signed an agreement with the courts to provide this funding. There is an MOU. There's also a contract pen for that, indicating that those funds are available. They've already submitted it to the Comptroller's Office, a voucher. It's in the payment process currently as we checked today before coming, and we anticipate the funding being released at any time. Therefore, the contracts with the vendors have already been signed by the courts, and those purchasing processes, due to the timeliness, this equipment's, there's back orders all across the country for this type of technology, so therefore we had to go ahead and initiate the purchasing process.
But there's no chance that the state will back out on the payment. Am I correct on that assumption?
Yes, you're correct.
That was the only thing I was worried about. Just want to make sure that we would get paid. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
All those opposed?
And then, Chairman Rosenbaum, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member Blair, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Member Renault, how do you vote?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Next, we have miscellaneous. Seeing none, we are adjourned.